Hey guys, Editor Grizz here. I just wanted to let you know, because of how long it took for me to upload the last video, which was the best head coaches in every team's history, I decided I'm not going to put the coaches' pictures on there because that was a mess. So I'm going to put the names up there instead, along with the team logos. So anyways, enjoy the episode. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Grizzly Talks Football. We are on episode 99 now. Episode 100 will be on the 28th, so be ready for it. Anyways, as for today's episode, we got, of course, the worst NFL head coaches for every NFL team. If you haven't seen the best head coaches video, I recommend you watch that, episode 98. Probably going to be a lot shorter for this video than the last one, because, well, all these coaches sucked. I know there's something called the best head coach in flops, but these guys were so bad, they're even worse than the flops because they just flat out sucked. If you have not already, make sure you check the link in the description with the entire playlist, so you'll have it for every episode so you can catch up, and you can also have it for future episodes whenever they come out. Don't forget to hit the red subscribe button down there. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. It also helps the channel out without further delay. Worst head coaches in every team's history. Let's do it. We're starting where we keep on starting. Arizona Cardinals. Their worst coach goes by the name of Phil Handler. He became the head coach of the Chicago Cardinals. They turned from Chicago Cardinals to Chicago Pittsburgh when the Steelers and Cardinals merged. Then they went back to Chicago Cardinals in 1945. But Phil Handler was the head coach from 43 to 45 in the 20th century, and he only won one game as the head coach. Just for context, he was 1-29 as the Cardinals head coach, and his overall record of coaching was 4-34. He was more better as an assistant than a head coach, and that was a good example of it, a perfect example in fact. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it right there. Up next, the Atlanta Falcons. A lot of people are going to say Bobby Petrino, but there was one that was actually far worse than him. And we got to go all the way back to the beginning of the franchise's existence to find the very first head coach for the Falcons was actually its worst. Of course, I'm talking about the Vanderbilt legend, Norb Hecker, the original head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, and unfortunately for him, he takes the cake for being the worst head coach in Falcons history. His career head coaching record was not good at all. 4-26-1. That's a 145 win percentage, which is really bad. His tenure with the Falcons was even worse. 4-26-1. Oh wait, no, that was just his entire coaching record with the Falcons, and he never coached a game again as a head man. That's just how bad he was in 3 years. It's a good thing we start somewhere, because over time we started to get at least respectable as a football team. Well, at least that led to Lehman Bennett. As for the Baltimore Ravens, this is a little weird. If you look in the head coach's history, the Ravens only had 3 coaches in their entire history. Not joking. They started in 1996, and they actually had only 3 coaches coach for them. And the worst of the bunch, you already know, the best one was John Harbaugh. The worst of the bunch was a guy by the name of Ted Marchibroda. I recommend you watch the KTO video about the Baltimore Colts and how big of a disaster they were before they went to Indianapolis, because Ted Marchibroda was in there only for a short period of time. He actually started strong with Baltimore for 3 straight seasons, winning division titles, but unfortunately his last 2 years were very forgettable. Then he came back to the Colts, had a couple of good seasons with Indianapolis, only one losing season at that point, but 1995, he led him to the playoffs, but unfortunately, he was let go. He took a new coaching job at Baltimore Ravens. Before the 2000 Ravens team won a Super Bowl, he didn't have a single winning record in Baltimore, or at least Marchibroda didn't, and he was fired after 1998. Or rather, he wasn't fired, he was told that he was not going to be re-signed, so he decided to resign from them. Digit means to resign. Resign, one of them means they'll bring you back. Another one, resign, means you're done. And just so you can tell the difference. For the Buffalo Bills, there's only one name that comes to mind. You probably don't know him, but it's easier that you do forget him because his name is Harvey Johnson. Well, who was Harvey Johnson? Well, he became a pretty long coach. He was a CFL running backs coach or backfield coach. Then he actually had a head coaching job at, what is this name? Kitchener-Waterloo Dutchman. What? It's a part of the Ontario Rugby Football Union. That's interesting. So after he was a rugby coach, he decided to go to the Buffalo Bills to be a defensive back coach, a kicker coach. Then he coached strictly kickers. Then he was an interim head coach in 1968 and became the head man in 1971. And in his time as not only an interim head coach and also the actual head coach, he won a grand total of 2 games in 2 seasons. His overall coaching record was 2-23-1 for a grand total of a 0.96 winning percentage, which is terrible. Like I said, very forgettable hire and easy to forget. I'm glad you guys can forget him, Buffalo fans. For the worst coach for the Panthers, this one's actually an easy one because this is one of the more recent head coaches, and he actually goes by the name of Frank Reich. This is the guy that made Matt Rule actually look like a decent head coach. For people who don't know who Frank Reich is, he was that one backup for the Buffalo Bills, the quarterback, that actually led a comeback win against the Oilers in a wild card game back in the day. So specifically the 1992-93 postseason. And you know the coincidence was that he actually did the same thing in Maryland when he played up against Miami in the 80s. After his player career dwindled in 1998, he decided to take coaching. Coached the Colts for a while. He was actually a very good offensive coordinator for a little bit. Took over as the head coach job at Indianapolis, was actually pretty solid there, leading Indianapolis to 3 winning seasons and 2 playoff bids. Unfortunately, no division titles. Then he was fired in 2022. As for his Carolina stint, it wasn't that much better. He went 1-10 and was fired mid-season. Oh yeah, and this was the 2nd straight year that this guy was fired mid-season. That's like near to impossible. You had to be so bad to get fired mid-season twice. That's just how bad Frank Reich was as the Panthers coach. So now we know it wasn't Bryce's fault in 2023, it was the coaching. And now Dave Canales is actually got some great potential to be a pretty nice head coach for Carolina. Only time will tell though. Chicago Bears, yeah, Bears fans, I think you knew this was coming a long time ago. Nope. Actually, it's not in the past. It's actually going to be very recent because this is a guy who was the only Bears head coach to be fired mid-season. He was so bad in 2024 that he was fired mid-season. Of course, I'm talking about the legendary Matt Eberflus. To say this guy was ass would be a major understatement. Sure, he won 7 games in 2023 with Justin Fields, but his coaching, his play calling sucked. It was a head-scratching move for the Bears not to fire him after that 2023 season where they had some expectations, not exactly much. But then in 2024, it all collapsed. Caleb Williams kept on getting set. Matt Eberflus just refused to change his play calling, and they just kept on losing. Then one fateful Thanksgiving day, he had the worst coaching mishap in recent memory. Or rather, one of the worst. Sorry, Mario Cristobal. When he had 30 seconds in a Thanksgiving game to try to tie the game against the Lions, and he wasted all of it and tried to throw a pass, and you probably know the rest. Then a day later, he got fired mid-season. Like I said before, the first Bears head coach to be fired mid-season. His total coaching record was 14-32, so he's one of the better worst coaches on this list, or this entire list of worst coaches for every team, so at least he has that. Still doesn't ignore the fact that he sucked. For the Cincinnati Bengals, I actually had to decide between 2 names. Dave Shula and Dick LeBeau. Dick LeBeau was the coach from 2000 to 2002. He only won 12 games. He actually had a worse winning percentage than Dave Shula, but I'll be honest, I'll give LeBeau his credit. He was a good head coach up until, his Bengals tenure. But I decided to give it to Dave Shula this time. He was the coach from 1992 to 1996, and in his time there, he only won 19 games out of 71. His best season was 7-9. I think DeBoer had a better season, but not to say that he was bad. Then in 1996, after a 1-6 record, he was fired mid-season. As for LeBeau, I kind of decided that he was more of a sacrificial lamb for the inevitable Marvin Lewis, or whoever the coach was in 2003. They were able to select Carson Palmer number 1 overall into the 2003 draft. That's why Dave Shula is the worst coach in Bengals history in my eyes. Oh yeah, it was Marvin Lewis who took over in 2003. Cleveland Browns, I think this one's obvious. The most miserable coaching tenure in NFL history. Make sure you check that KTO video, dude. KTO has been a legend in the football community. Of course, the worst one was Hugh Jackson from the Cleveland Browns. His record in 40 games was, drumroll please, 3-36-1. Yep, Hugh Jackson won a grand total of 3 games in the 2.5 years that he coached the Browns. Where is he now? He's still coaching to this day. He's actually the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach of Georgia State. Ouch. He got his first head coaching job in the Oakland Raiders in 2011. He did pretty well for the most part. He was surprisingly fired after an 8-8 season. But then he finally got a head coaching job at Cleveland, where he won 1 game in 2016, went 0-16 in 2017, somehow stayed with the team, and went 2-5-1 in 2018 with Baker Mayfield as the number 1 pick quarterback, and of course was fired mid-season. You can't get any lower than that, right? America's team, the Dallas Cowboys. I think you saw this one coming. The worst head coach in Dallas Cowboys history was none other than Dave Campo in the 2000s. I cannot believe there's only been 10 head coaches in the Cowboys' entire history. Man, they were one of the most storied franchises in history. When you take a look at every single one of those 10 head coaches, nobody came even close to the idiocy, or I don't know what word it's called, but nobody got as worse as Dave Campo. Campo was a two-sport phenom in the 60s. Actually coached starting in 1970 somehow. Had many different jobs, landing his first NFL job in 1989 as a defensive assistant with the Dallas Cowboys. Then he worked up his ranks, and eventually in 2000 he was hired as the head man. Where, as you would guess, he was ass. These were his seasons from 2000 to 2002. 5-11. And that's it. Yep, just 5-11 every season. So of course, if you multiply 5 by 3, you would get the amount of wins of 15. You multiply the losses by 3, 11 times 3, 33. So his head coaching record as it stands is 3-1-3-1 percentage, 15-33. And no surprise, in 2002 he was fired, or after 2003. He's actually the only head coach in Dallas history to not have a winning record or even coach a playoff game, which is quite impressive in its own state. So impressive that he was complete dog shit. For the Denver Broncos, yep, I think you knew this was coming. But the worst head coach of Broncos history didn't even last the whole season with Denver. Of course, I'm talking about the beginning years of Russell Wilson in Denver, the disaster show that was Nathaniel Hackett. I called him the Hack because he was that dog shit at coaching. His one season with Denver, he went 4-11. That wasn't even the worst part. His coaching sucked. His adjustments, trash. He was so bad. He was an assistant starting back in 2003 with University of California, Davis. And he actually worked his way up the ranks, was a pretty nice offensive coordinator for Buffalo, Jacksonville, and Green Bay. I don't know about the first two, but the third one, the Packers, yes. He was a good offensive coordinator. And then in 2022, he was hired to be the Broncos head coach and to be able to coach Russell Wilson into an MVP candidate like Aaron Rodgers once was. To say this wasn't a disaster would be lying to yourself. To say this was a disaster would be an absolute understatement. By midseason, 4-11, offense was absolutely atrocious. And a lot of it had to do with the head coach. I mean, he was that bad. Also his decision making, absolutely putrid. That's why I feel like he's the worst coach of Broncos history. Josh McDaniels is a close contender, but he did have a lot more wins than Hackett did. And he was also Bill Belichick's golden boy as offensive coordinator, so there you go. Detroit Lions, I love this name, but unfortunately that doesn't excuse him for being an absolute putrid head coach. Marty Mornhinweg. I was actually debating between him and Rod Marinelli, since Marinelli actually was the coach when the Lions had their worst season in history. Of course, the worst season you could get in a 16-game season, 0-16 in 2008. But I found out that Marty Mornhinweg's tenure was even worse. At least Marinelli actually went 7-9 in 2007. That was his only saving grace. Oh boy, you lucked out. He started coaching in 1985 with the Montana Grizzlies, I believe, and he was a receivers coach. Then he worked his way up the ranks, got his first first NFL job as the Packers offensive coordinator and QB's coach. And he bounced around as an offensive, assistant coach, coordinator, all that stuff. QB's coach as well, so he knew his way with quarterbacks, or at least it appeared he did. After a stint with the 49ers from 1997 to 2000, he took the head coach job for the Detroit Lions in 2001. Keep in mind, he actually was a Super Bowl champion in 1996 as the quarterback coach for the Packers. And he also later became an assistant coach of the year in 2010, but of course, we're talking about 2001 to 2002. His records were 2-14 and 3-13, and he was fired after the 2002 season, so his final record was 5-27. I think if it was more so on that the quarterback situation was a complete train wreck. They had Charlie Batch at starting quarterback, which is pretty nuts. And you also had Ty Detmer as the quarterback. Hey, shout out to BYU's only Heisman Trophy winner. But yeah, that tenure sucked. Oh yeah, and he also ruined Joey Harrington's career, so thanks a lot, Marty. No, I'm not giving it to John Arcus. He was an interim coach after Bill Edwards was fired. Anyways, let's move on. The team with the most NFL championships in history, the Green Bay Packers. Their worst coach was actually going by the name of Ray McClain somehow, aka the sacrificial lamb, to make way for, of course, the legendary Vince Lombardi, who I once said was the best head coach in Packers history. Curly Lambeau does make a good argument, but I decided to go with Lombardi, most iconic coach in Packers history. Here's the thing though, here's what's wrong with this. Ray McClain actually was a co-coach in 1953, but then he was the head man in 1958. Guess how many games he won? Yep, he won one game. He obviously played NFL football in the 1940s for the Bears, but then decided to start coaching late in the 40s. Heading into the 50s, he was a backfield coach for the Packers, the Bears' rival. Became interim coach in 1953 and became the head man in 1958. His career record was 1-12-1 as the head coach, whether it was interim or full-time. Yeah, this was bad. I did forget about the Houston Texans last episode. Obviously, I said Gary Kubiak was the best head coach. And when I saw these winning percentages, Bill O'Brien actually had more success, but come on, are we really going to call Bill O'Brien the best coach when he made the worst trade in history? As far as Texans history, he pissed off Deshaun Watson. He pissed off the Houston fan base. Gary Kubiak didn't do that shit. As for the worst coach in Texans history, we don't have to go too far from the current coach, D'Amico Ryans, to say that Lovie Smith was the worst coach in Texans history. Lasted one season, went 3-13-1, and also lost the Texans the number one pick on purpose. Yeah, you won a game by going for it on 4th and 20 and getting it. Oh my god. David Coley, you lucky bastard. You're lucky that Lovie Smith had one less win than you, because you would have been the worst one. But yeah, Lovie Smith was absolute putrid. We're just gonna move on. And the Texans only had 6 head coaches in over 20 years, which is pretty stunning. For the Colts, of course, we gotta go back to the 80s, before they became the Indianapolis Colts, back to the Baltimore Colts days, to say that Mike McCormick was actually so bad. He got into fights with his players, he didn't get along with anybody, well, except Robert Irsay, of course. Be sure to check that KTO video as well. I think I already mentioned this, but yeah, go check out the Disgrace to Sports or something like that. team that people call the Streets Horse or something like that. Something about the Baltimore Colts before they went to Indianapolis. Be sure to check that video out. But anyways, Mike McCormick, bottom line, he sucked and he didn't get along with anybody. In 32 games from 1980 to 1981, he went 9-23. If we all know anything about the 1981 Colts, they had the worst points allowed as far as the defense in the NFL history up to date. The worst part, they never even got the first draft pick. That went to the Patriots because the Colts beat them twice. Yeah, they went 7-9 the first year, 1980. That was just the beginning of the downward spiral. And then the 1981 happened, which was even worse. And he was fired on the spot. It was so bad. Man, no first overall pick. No happiness in Baltimore. And a couple years later, they go to Indy. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, it's just straight up Urban Meyer. That guy was a disaster. This guy went 2-11 as a head coach, but that wasn't the worst part. He did, like McCormick, he didn't get along with anybody on that team. Of course, he had a legendary career at Ohio State, winning a national title, a lot of Big Ten titles, but then he tried to go to the NFL with Jacksonville, trying to help Trevor Lawrence become a superstar. He was a very successful college coach. Unfortunately, though, 2-11, fired on the spot. Of course, he sucked as a head coach. His game plan sucked. He didn't get along with anybody. And Urban Meyer treated him so bad. That's why he was so disliked in Jacksonville. Oh yeah, and the first 5 games were added to Jacksonville's long losing streak of 20 straight L's. Yikes. Safe to say, Urban Meyer did not help their situation whatsoever. In fact, he drove them to the ground. For the Kansas City Chiefs' worst coaches, I mean, there were some average ones, and then there's a guy by the name of Romeo Crennel that stands out for all the wrong reasons. Lasted 2 years, well, once as the interim coach, then as the full-time head coach, and he only lasted 19 games when he won 4 of them. To give him credit, he was a Super Bowl champion, a 5-time Super Bowl champion at that. For the Patriots, for the Giants as well. I mean, he had some prestige. Went 2-1 as the interim head coach in 2011, but only won 2 more games in 2012. Romeo Crennel was the coach for the worst Chiefs team, arguably, in their entire team's history, and they are glad to forget him because of Andy Reid. You could say that Crennel was the sacrificial lamb of Andy Reid for the inevitable arrival of Andy Reid. But I say he just flat out sucked. When he was coach of the Chiefs, of course. Not before then. Vegas Raiders. I gotta put this guy on the list because he was so bad for Denver and Vegas. Why did this guy get a head coaching job? If you want to know what I'm talking about, it's Josh McDaniels. This guy was so bad as a head man. Patriots fans, I'm sure you know who Josh McDaniels is. He was a good offensive coordinator for New England for a while. Was actually the offensive coordinator for quite a bunch of Super Bowl runs. Had a stint with Denver, sucked there. Then in 2022, I believe, he got a stint with the Raiders and he sucked there too. He was kind of better in Denver than he was in Vegas, but he was fired mid-season both times by both teams. His best season was 8-8 with Denver Broncos in 2009. Then he got Jay Cutler traded. He just did not get along with anybody. Led the Raiders to 6-11 in 22 after they made the playoffs in 21. Then after a 3-5 start, he was immediately fired. Went 9-16 in 25 games. At least he has 6 Super Bowl championships as an offensive coordinator and a QB's coach and a defensive assistant and a personnel assistant. But as the head coach, Josh, you will never be able to live that disaster down. For the LA Chargers, I actually decided to go with Mike Riley as the worst one. I'm not doing Jim Jones. He was an interim head coach for 10 games. He actually won 3 games. Then he went back to college where he had much more success in Hawaii. But Mike Riley, ouch. Before he took the head coaching job at San Diego, he was sort of a Pacific Conference regular. Had stints as assistant head coach at USC and a stint as a head coach at Oregon State. He actually broke Oregon State's streak of 28 straight losing seasons back in 1998. That earned a trip to the San Diego Chargers of the NFL, where he signed a 5-year, $750,000 deal. $750K per year, actually. So that was more of 3.7 mil. Oh yeah, did I also forget to mention in the late 80s to early 90s, he was a part of the CFL where he won 2 Grey Cups. Yeah, he actually had the prestige in his time. As for the NFL, though, yeah, I mean, he did have an 8-8 season in 99, but his last 2 seasons were definitely ones that he would rather forget. 1-15 and 5-11, so his winning percentage in the NFL was actually .292. Pretty bad. After his tenure with Oregon State, he actually went back to them and led him to some pretty nice seasons. I mean, it wasn't all great, but hey, he wasn't that bad either. As a college coach, he was actually pretty good. As an NFL coach, disaster. For the LA Rams, we're going to go all the way back to the 1930s for this one. Almost a century ago, the second head coach after the 5-2-2 season from David Wetzel, the very first head coach for the Rams, this guy's name was Hugo Bezdek. Very forgettable name, and for good reason, because in the 14 games he spent with the Rams from 1937 to early in the 1938 season, he won a measly 1 game. Yep, he went 1-13 in his entire time with the Rams, and he was never heard from again. He went 1-10 in 1937, went 0-3 in 1938, and of course he was fired mid-season. And then a guy by the name of Art Lewis came around, and he was okay. But man, Cleveland Rams, I'm glad y'all forgot about Hugo Bezdek as fast as I did. The worst coach for the Dolphins? Okay, this one's pretty obvious. Cam Cameron was definitely absolutely the worst coach in Miami history. Cam Cameron lasted 1 season after the unexpected departure of then Miami Dolphins head coach and most important man at Tuscaloosa, as we know now, Nick Saban. To say Cam Cameron was bad would be a massive understatement. He went 1-15 in 2007. He was awful. Immediately fired after the 1-15 stint, then Tony Sparano came in, and then the Wildcat offense took over. After that, I mean, Sparano actually led them to an 11-5 record in 2008 and a division title. The single season biggest turnaround in NFL history. Actually tied for that. And everybody forgot about Cam Cameron, and I'm glad we did. For the Minnesota Vikings, Bud Grant, if you guys remember, I said he was the best coach in Vikings history. He had a 17-year stint from 1967 to 1983, where he won 11 division titles, 3 NFC championships, 1 NFL championship, and made it to 4 Super Bowls. Unfortunately, lost every single one of them. So after he stepped away as the head coach in 1983, in 1984, there was a guy by the name of Les Steckel that took over, and yeah, he was the reason that Bud Grant came back for 1 more season. Les Steckel lasted 1 year, and he only won 3 games. He literally, almost in a way, forced Bud Grant out of retirement. I'm glad this guy's getting forgotten because boy did he suck. I bet Bud Grant was pissed with him after that 1984 season. He remember saying, "You little whippersnapper, you really make me come back for 1 more year to go 7-9?" For the Patriots, worst coach, we don't have to go too far from present day because Jared Mayo, just this past season, turned into the worst head coach in tenure in Patriots history. After Bill Belichick left coaching in 2023, at the end of the 2023 season, Jared Mayo was hired in 2024. And unfortunately, he only won 4 games. And then was immediately fired afterward to make way for Mike Vrabel to take over. Unfortunately, he was the sacrificial lamb, and he just was not given that much of a chance. I'm sorry, Jared, but you are the worst coach in Patriots history, sadly. At least you get to see Mike Vrabel potentially beat the playoffs. For the New Orleans Saints, we got to go all the way back near the beginning of the Saints' existence as a franchise from the 1970s to look at J.D. Roberts. Played college ball in Oklahoma, and as a coach, he was a coach in 1956. Then he worked his way up the ranks, was an assistant coach at Oklahoma after their glory years in the 50s when, they won 47 straight games. He actually got his first NFL coaching job as the Saints linebackers coach in 67, then became Richmond Roadrunners 1969 head coach. Then after 1970, he decided to go to the Saints as the head man. To say that this guy sucked? Oh boy, yeah, do I got a treat for you. This guy's total record in 3 years with the Saints from 1970 to 72 was 7-25-3, including the 1-6 tenure as the Saints interim coach? No. After a 2-11-1 stint in 1972, he was immediately fired. And nobody's heard of J.D. Roberts ever since. I like the name though, just a horrible head coaching hire. We're going to stay in the 70s for this New York Football Giants worst coach, and it's actually Bill Arnsparger from 74 to 76. By the way, rest in peace, Bill Arnsparger. He actually died in 2015. He actually died to health concerns, and yeah, very apologize that I had to say that. Yeah, she started coaching in 1950 for Miami, Ohio as the D-line coach. He was a pretty nice defensive coordinator. Then he went to the Baltimore Colts as a D-line coach in 1964. Actually, he became a defensive coordinator first with the Dolphins when they had, the greatest season ever in their entire history. Then he went to the New York Giants, and after the 1973 season, after they won a second straight Super Bowl, to go coach the Giants. And unfortunately, he only won 7 games in his tenure from 1974 to 1976, and was fired mid-season after an 0-7 start. Well, at least later on in his career, he was able to get an SEC title and become an SEC Coach of the Year twice. So that was pretty good after his NFL stint. Did a good job of helping LSU go back to, the SEC glory days until, of course, the 2000s. There are a lot of candidates for the New York Jets' worst head coach ever. There are quite a bunch of them. But I decided to go with Rich Kotite. He played in the NFL and AFL, I believe, from 1967 to 1972. Then became a Saints tight ends coach in 1977. Worked his way up the ranks. Became the Eagles head coach in 1991 to 1994. Where he actually led them to a playoff berth and 2 10-win seasons. Good Philadelphia coach, but then when he was hired in 1995 by the New York Jets, everything went down the shit. 3-13 in 1995, and the worst record in 1996, 1-15. Immediately fired after that 96 season. That made way for Bill Parcells to take over in 1997 to try to revive the Jets. Thus did many others. For the Philadelphia Eagles, you gotta go all the way to the beginning, because the worst coach in Philadelphia's history is actually Bert Bell. First off, who is Bert Bell? Well, took an assistant coach at his alma mater, Penn, from 1920 to 1928, became an assistant coach at Temple for 3 years, then became a head coach of the Eagles and Steelers in 1936 to 1941. For his head coaching tenure, yeah, it was absolutely abysmal. The most games he won was in 1938 when he won 5 of them. Unfortunately, he didn't get higher than 4th in the NFL Eastern Conference, I think it was. He either won 1 or 2 games in Philly, didn't win a single game in Pittsburgh before he was fired mid-season. Or maybe he was the interim coach after one got fired, I'm not too sure. Jeez, Bert Bell's tenure was very forgettable, but also very bad, so I'm glad we forgot about that one, Eagles fans. Speaking of the Steelers, their worst coach is actually a guy by the name of Mike Nixon, who was actually arguably even worse than Bert Bell as far as the Steelers coach, because I don't think it's fair to judge Bert Bell for only 2 games. He was actually an assistant coach from 1936 all the way to 1958 before he landed his first head coaching job with Washington in 59. Then he became an assistant for 4 years at Pittsburgh before taking over as the coach in 1965. And how did he do as a head coach for the Steelers? He only won 2 games. Unfortunately for him, no sacrificial lamb excuse. Just another forgetful and very bad head coaching hire for the Steelers. the one team with 6 Super Bowls along with the Patriots. For San Francisco, we're going to go more recent. We're going to fast forward, I think around 60 years, to 2016, where we find Chip Kelly. His tenure was a little interesting. Started coaching in 1990 for Columbia, worked his way up the ranks, eventually got to be the offensive coordinator at Oregon in 2007, then became the head man in 2009, where he led Oregon to some very good seasons. More specifically, championship contending seasons. I'm talking Pac-10 titles, Rose Bowls. Oh yeah, Pac-12 titles also. You get the idea. He was probably one of the most important people in Oregon history. Then he took his first head coaching job with the Philadelphia Eagles. And over there, he actually led them to 2 10-win seasons, 1 playoff berth, 1 division title. But in 2015, he was fired mid-season after a 6-9 stint. Then comes the San Francisco head coach job, where that was even worse. 49ers didn't fit the style that Chip Kelly wanted, and that team won 2-14, and he was immediately fired and shipped off to the Shadow Realm until UCLA decided to pull the trigger. Eventually, after some 3-4 win stints, he decided in 2021 that he was going to turn it up a notch, and he actually didn't do that bad. 2021 to 23, he actually, the most games that he lost was only 5. 8-4, 9-4, and 8-5 with a bowl win. Then, of course, he went to Ohio State in 2024. Now he's the offensive coordinator for the Raiders. So it's nice to see that somebody's still active here. Yeah, by the way, Matt Eberflus is still active, and he is the defensive coordinator for Dallas Cowboys. Ouch. Welcome to hell, Dallas. For the Seattle Seahawks, this is a little interesting because this guy, it was actually really good for the Raiders, whether you're in Oakland or LA. But for the Seahawks, it was one that he would like to forget forever. But unfortunately, I can't let you do that. Of course, I'm talking about the legendary Raiders coach, Tom Flores. Yeah, you thought I was going to say John Madden. Nope. He didn't even go to Seattle. It was Tom Flores that took the bait. He was a 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Raiders. Took under the wing by John Madden, but then as a head coach, he was able to get 3 Super Bowl rings. Well, 2 Super Bowl rings as the head man, once with John Madden. And he actually led the Raiders to being a very good team. Then 5-10, they fired him. Then he came back to coach the Seahawks. Seattle fans rejoice because this guy has a winning culture around him. Maybe he can lead us to a winning culture now. Unfortunately, they were not even close. He didn't even get a winning season with Seattle. His winning percentage was .292 in 3 years. 1992 was more than likely the worst offense anyone's ever seen. Worst scoring offense ever. Guess the average points per game they had. It was 8.8 points per game. That is terrible. 2-14, of course. Then they had back-to-back 6-10 seasons from 93 to 94. Fortunately, they had the unfortunate news. I said unfortunate twice. I don't care. About 3 times. They had to draft Rick Meyer number 2 overall in the 1993 draft after Drew Bledsoe was picked. Safe to say, Meyer sucked, and so did Flores, ran off to the sunset with that stint in his record. It was a complete disaster in Seattle. Not exactly his fault because the Seahawks at the time were just flat out awful. Meyer was okay his rookie season. I think he got Rookie of the Year or something like that. But then after that, he completely floundered out. I'm not an admirer of Tom Flores' success with Seattle. I'm more admired by his Raiders run. Unfortunately, Flores is on the list as Seattle's worst coach ever. Moving on to the Tampa Bay Bucks. Remember when I said that there was one team Lehman Bennett? I can't remember who it was. But there's no way I'm saying John McKay is the worst head coach in history because of, 26 straight losses to start their entire existence. There's no way I can call John McKay the worst head coach when Lehman Bennett existed for Tampa Bay. Lehman Bennett actually took his first head coaching job with the Falcons in 1977 after some bit of offensive coordinators, running backs coach, and assistant coach in college. First football or NFL job as the offensive backs coach with St. Louis. Then he went to the Lions. Then he became a wide receiver coach for the Rams. Then in 1977, he took over as the Falcons' head man, where in 1977, Atlanta Falcons were more known for their defense as far as their struggling offense, going 7-7. As a Falcons head coach, he actually led Atlanta to a division title and 3 playoff bids, including that magical 12-4 season. He actually finished with a winning record, a losing record only twice in those 6 years. And 1982 was his final season in Atlanta. Then he tried to take over to Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and 1985 to 1986, they were terrible, going 2-14 each of those years, and he was fired after the 1986 season. And unfortunately for him, he was never heard or seen from again. For the Tennessee Titans, we got to go to the Tennessee Titans to find Ken Whisenhunt, the guy who led the Cardinals to a Super Bowl, but unfortunately became the worst coach in Titans history. So after his stint with the Cardinals, where he went from 2007 to 2012, became the offensive coordinator for the San Diego Chargers with Phillip Rivers. He actually didn't do too bad with Phillip Rivers, so the Titans decided to scoop him up. In 2014, he led them to a 2-14 record. And then 2015, with rookie Marcus Mariota, they went 1-6 with him, and he was fired mid-season. I will say, he wasn't the worst coach in Cardinals history. He did have some success. He only had 2 losing seasons in 6 years. I think he was fired in 2012, but then Chargers took him to help Phillip Rivers out. Then 2014 was where his coaching career went to die until, of course, the UFL existed. And then after only 2 games, he resigned. So, in all hindsight, Ken Whisenhunt was not as good as advertised. At least he has 2 division titles. And the final team on this database is the Washington Commanders. And, you know something? I did it for Andy Reid. I'm going to do it again. 2 head coaches. Andy Reid was the best head coach for 2 different teams. Mike Nixon was the worst coach for 2 different teams as well, because he was the worst coach in Commanders history as well. How the hell did Mike Nixon become the worst coach for not only the Steelers, but also the Washington Commanders franchise? 2 of some pretty good franchises in the 20th century. Well, before he was Pittsburgh's coach in 1965, before he had that absolute disastrous season, he coached the Washington Redskins from the 1959 to 1960 season. Unfortunately for him, he went 4-18-2 in those 2 years. And he was fired very short after the 1960 season, where Bill Peake stepped in. He didn't do too much better, but he wasn't as bad. Mike Nixon, you will go down as probably one of the worst coaches in the NFL history, if that. This year we go to military guy. Salute to the troops. There we go. Those are the worst NFL head coaches for every single NFL team, and that's going to do it for this episode. Not as tired as I was last episode, so there you go. So, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure you give it a big fat thumbs up. Make sure you're tuned in for the 100th episode, because it's going to be pretty massive. Don't forget to hit the red subscribe button down there, hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single one of my videos. This sticker is signing off for now, and until next time, I will see you guys later. Peace, love, keep the grizzly vibes with you at all times. Take care. See you for episode 100.